Let's walk through the process of how to color some simple and easy spring plaid patterns. In this tutorial, I'm going to walk you through two different plaid patterns, both fairly simple, and all plaid patterns are just a combination of lines going horizontally and vertically, basically making crosses across your page. And to get some variation in your plaids, you can just change the thickness of those lines, the colors, if those lines are dashed or dotted or solid. And we're going to play with some of those variations here to get a couple different plaid patterns. The first plaid that we're going to do is a spring plaid with some nice Easter colors. I'll show you the Ohuhu color codes I use here in a second, but you can use any kind of alcohol markers, or basically this plaid will work with any kind of markers you have. They can be water-based as well. But we're using a light green, a light pink, a lilac light purple, and kind of a buttercup light yellow. And the Ohuhu codes for that are G420, R080, V030, and YR240. I believe all these colors can be found in the pastel Ohuhu set, and I'll link that below in the caption. This first pattern is super simple. You are just making lines. You'll be making thin lines in each color all the way across your space. So you're going to put the colors in order. I keep them in this order of green, pink, purple, and then yellow. And we're making thin lines with a white space in between each line. And the goal here is to keep all the lines and the white space at an even thickness. And here I kept them pretty narrow, but you could of course play with the pattern, especially depending on what space you're trying to fill. Make them thicker or thinner, depending on whatever look you want to go for. But I went with a pretty thin line, and I'm using my brush tip marker to do this. You could use the chisel or the fine tip marker, but here I'm using brush tip to kind of give a sketchy but thin line look. And once you do that all the way across your space going vertical, you're going to do the same thing going horizontal. Super simple process. You are just making lines. If you have a hard time making straight lines, one, you could make them look sketchier and kind of give it that rougher look to it. Or you can go in with a pencil, draw your lines out with a ruler ahead of time, and then cover them up with the marker. These are all pretty light colors, so if you do that with a pencil, you'll want to erase the pencil a little bit so the line is pretty faint. Because once you color over the pencil will be locked in and you won't be able to erase it. And with these colors being so light, you would be able to see the pencil marks through them, through the colors. And then once you do all your lines with your white spaces in between, going horizontally, that is it. And you get this very cute Easter pattern, spring colors, bright, fun. All right, for our next pattern here, we're going to change it up a little bit and play with some of that line thickness and types of lines we're going to make. We're going to add some dashed lines into this. So I'm going to start with a light green color. We're going to stay in that spring color palette. This is the G120, but it's a light pastel green. And we're going to make thick lines going horizontally across your space, and then we'll do the same thing going vertically. And we want to keep the lines the same thickness the best that we can. And we want to keep whatever space we put between the lines the same thickness as well. And once we do that horizontally, we go back and do the same thing vertically. For a plaid, everything you do horizontally, you do the same thing vertically. And as long as you match those two things together, you'll get all kinds of different cute plaid patterns. After we finish drawing our vertical green lines, we're going to take a slightly darker green color. I used the G340 here, but I just used the same tone in one darker shade. And I'm going to cover up that square that is created where the two lines intersect. This gives this plaid pattern a little bit of a gingham look. And we are just darkening up that overlap of our rows and columns. Some colors will naturally have a little bit of a darker shade in that square when you overlap the horizontal and vertical lines, but if it doesn't and you want that look, you can just take the same marker you used before or a slightly darker shade and go over that square to give it a gingham look. Next, we're taking a light blue marker. I use BG4 here, and I'm using my fine tip markers for this one. You could certainly use your brush or chisel tip, whatever you have. For such a thin line, I found the fine tip a lot easier to control. And we are putting a thin line in the middle of that white space. So between each of our green lines, we are adding a light blue line. And we do that horizontally, and then we do that vertically. Then we come in here with a purple acrylic pen. I'm using the Grabby acrylic pens, and it has a nice fine tip on it. And I am putting lines basically on either side of my light blue line, and I'm making those lines dashed. So this is an example of what I was talking about earlier, of using dashed lines or dotted lines to give a little bit more interest to your plaid pattern. So with that light purple acrylic pen, I just go on either side of the light blue line and add little dashes. I did try to keep the dashes kind of in the same place on either side of the line, but that is up to you how much you want to do that. And then I do the same thing going horizontally. On either side of that blue line, we are adding little dashes of purple. And then at the very end here, I come in with one more detail with a pink acrylic pen, another pen from the Grabby set with that fine tip on it. And I am going through my green lines with a pink line, nice thin pink line. So this pattern's a lot more complicated than the other one, but it's still the same process of just layering on lines of different thicknesses on top of each other. And you can play with this format with different color palettes, with different types of line, with different line thicknesses to create any kind of plaid you want. But here are a couple spring plaids that you can use in your coloring books, your coloring pages, your art projects. And these were done with alcohol markers, but a lot of these plaid patterns can be easily repeated with water-based markers, of course colored pencils, any medium you'd like to use. But I hope you enjoy this little tutorial, and if you have any questions, leave them below in the comments.